Now I feel like I have to read from the broadside. They did such a nice job of the broadside. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was between these and the tiger socks, so.
No, can't hear? Oh, okay. All right. We're testing in. What a lovely day it is. But they're still not hearing me in the back. So thank you for the Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Hogan, the coordinator of the Milwaukie Poetry Series, and absolutely delighted to see you here tonight. I know I say this, but there's a lot of things we could be doing, and there's lots of demands on our time. And we're choosing to come out and, in community, listen to a poet, read poetry, and talk about that, and get a chance to ask the poet questions. So we're really delighted that you're here. I also want to welcome any of you who have logged in, because we are live streaming this event. So thank you for the same reasons for logging in to the reading tonight. And remember, if you have a question or you want to make a comment as we go along, put it in the chat. And Josh will endeavor, when we get to the question and answer period, to get your question answered in the chat. So let me say some thanks. Thanks to the city of Milwaukie. They've been supportive of us from the beginning. Thanks to the Lenny Library, this lovely library, which is 5 years old, but really delightful. Much different than the previous library that was built in 1954. But this just fits on the footprint better, too. So we love it. And I hope everybody got a good parking place. It's not too far away. And so we always want to make sure that hopefully there's enough parking. So thanks to the Lenny Library. Also, thanks to the Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee. And there's Nate. And Nate, there he is. Nate is here. My lovely wife Jane was not able to be here. She had a different event that she had to go to that her daughter was performing at. So thanks to the committee and people on the board, because as you know, you don't have something happen unless you have a group of people working on it. So we're very grateful. And finally tonight, thanks to Willamette Falls Media and our tech person back here, Josh Reynolds, who is, we call him the magician. And let's give Josh a hand. He's the one that makes this all go. So thank you very much, Josh. Future events coming up. We have started our first Friday readings. And the first Friday event in June is going to be at St. John the Evangelist here in Milwaukie. And it is going to be the winners of the Clackamas County Arts Alliance Poetry Contest. So we've sponsored that this year, and the prizes will be awarded, and they will have an opportunity to read their poems. And our host for that event is here. And I want to recognize and have us welcome our Oregon Poet Laureate Emerita, Paul Ann Peterson. So thank you very much. And this is open to all. If you want to hear some good student poetry, come out next week, 6:30. There'll be an invitation out for that. And our next poet is going to be Jessica Reamer. She's going to be here the second Wednesday in June. So that'll be the next thing to look forward to. And speaking of things, to look forward to, we've been looking forward to this reading for some time. It's my pleasure to introduce our poet tonight, Donna. We're delighted to continue our 19th season. So we're in our 19th season with a reading by her. She's a poet, psychotherapist, and teacher. Her poems have appeared widely in journals, including Prairie Scooter, the Comstock Review, the Journal, and New Ohio Review. Her first book, Snow White, When No One Was Looking, was composed of a series of persona poems and was published with CW Books in 2014. In 2020, she was awarded the 2020 Lois Cranston Prize from Calyx Journal for her poem, Your Body, Still Your Body. In June 2024, her new full-length collection, Each Unkept Secret, was published by Moonpath Press. The book, a finalist for the Sally Elbiso Award, focuses on family, both family of origin and her marriage and children, and explores relationships with both the living and the dead. Donna has taught poetry and creative writing for more than 30 years to adults and children. Thank you for that. Each Unkept Secret was chosen as a finalist for the 2024 Patterson Award. Wow, some accomplishments. It's my pleasure to introduce our poet for the evening, Donna Prinzmetal. Great.
Hey, everybody. Can everybody hear me? That's the first question. Okay, great. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, board members and everybody here that makes these readings happen. I feel like I should also thank all my poetry sisters and brothers in here, because I know there are a lot of poets in here whose work I really admire. I'm going to read some new poems, but I'm going to start with some poems from this book. And I keep worrying that people can't hear me, but this book, titled by Paul Ann Peterson, and I'm going to start with the first poem, which, if you have the book, is on page 5. I'm just going to say that when I'm reading from one of the books what the page number is, just in case. At the mahogany table, my mother fingers the silver bell, her pale skin marked with brown spots. My hand looks small next to hers. Everyone is talking at once. On my plate, the pink roast beef drowns in gravy. A half-eaten popover has melted the round scoop of butter. My mother smells of replique and cigarettes. I can't stop looking at the yellow and brown cityscape, my father's painting on the wall. Tall geometric shapes, its oil smell. The dining room echoes with voices, 645 Comstock in spring, the end of another school year, almost. My sister Jan laughs too loud. Debbie hasn't changed her name yet. Dad is at the other end, his voice so deep it rumbles under my chair. You need to pay attention to the details, he says. They are talking about Debbie's valedictorian speech. It is 1967. My white cardigan with the tiny fake pearl buttons is too warm. I'm afraid I'll get butter on the sleeve, so I take it off. My hair is short and still gold, but it's growing out and tickles my ears. I am so used to this cacophony, everyone talking at once, when a new voice, higher than I expect, rises with a kind of ping. I feel it in the back of my throat. What about starting with a list? All those science projects. I say, out loud it seems, I don't even believe it's me. I am thinking of ideas for her speech, but nobody pays attention, except my oldest sister, Karen. Her brown eyes meet my blue ones. Wait, she says in a voice of rare authority. Donna said something. She emphasizes my name, though she couldn't have heard exactly what I said. There is a break in the clink of silver knives on white wedgewood, and the voices have all stopped. There could be a floodlight bathing me in a waterfall of white. I feel laid bare, naked, cold. Goose flesh rises on my arms as everyone begins to clap. It is the first time I have spoken at the dinner table, ever. I am 11 years old. I want to hide in the kitchen at the little kids' table. I want to pick up the gravy boat and dive into it. Everyone is looking at me. I slip down in the stiff-backed dining room chair. My blue shift clings to my sticky thighs. I have spoken. They know I can speak. There's no going back now. Thanks. The next poem I'm going to read is on page 7. It's called Nomenclature, and it's kind of about wanting there to be different words sometimes. And my mother died the same week as my father, but 29 years later. So I just kind of feel like going to bed in March. But there has never been a word for this. Orphan won't cut it. This split open, jagged wound that can't be closed. It's what we want, isn't it? To be known, to be labeled for the damaged goods that we are. Whatever life you have led and whatever lens you have looked through, you know this. Remember feeling for the light switch on the wall, even in a blackout, imagining some ordinary glitch has landed you in this immaculate dark? You know what it's like. The laundered myths that should explain the beast hovering in the corner of that room, fangs bared, harbinger of the campfire becoming wildfire. There should be a word for that. If only I could find the right syntax for grieving, the right vocabulary. I want to drink the nectar of words, feel the carnal caress, the manna, the exact syllables shaping in my mouth. Weepingness should be a word. Who couldn't get behind weepingness? And we, the proud misfits, could move to that country where aloneness is as commonplace as shadows. And the next poem, everybody has, because it's the broadside. Do I have it? I think Tom took it back, so I'll just read it from the book. It's okay, I'll read it from the book. Inheritance. From my mother, I inherited a dwarfed pinky toe, one tiny white spot on my skin, wide hips. From my father, his love for the Impressionists, his craving for books. From the poets, in spite of all efforts to the contrary, I inherited a love of dead things. The threadbare gold skeletons of last year's tomatillos, the artichoke flowers that turn to dust when I try to hold them. And once in Kelly Park, the translucent white ghosts of a mother and daughter swinging their legs from the branch of an old oak. That diaphanous light, their unendurable beauty. On page 10 of this book is a poem called Lens. And I think I'm going to switch glasses. That's not part of the poem. I used to, when I was teaching, I'd give people assignments to write about either what they knew or what they imagined about their birth or how their parents met. And so I decided I should do it myself. Lens. I am not born yet, not even anticipated. Before the White House on Comstock Avenue, up the sprawling driveway, the sweet lavender wisteria, the blacktop where we tried to fry an egg. There is a party, elegant summer dresses. She laughs and covers the excruciating gap between her front teeth. He looks handsome in a dark suit. She is there with the heart surgeon, his brother, before he went crazy. They look at each other across the lighted patio. He asks his brother permission to dance with her in the saucy, jazz-spiked evening, glass of bruised moonlight. She is still thin. Her hair falls in delicate wisps. She dances with Errol Flynn, yes, really. But all she will talk about the next day is my father. A relief from her cold mother, the crevasse of childhood she clamors to escape. Her bright eyes winking back at Orion. She is 22. He is 36. She has such hopes. And all these years later, if forgiveness is a country, can I speak its language? Is it a place like Chicago or the French Riviera? I visit it frequently, as I visit her persimmon tree planted in memory, and the Chinese elm in front of the house on Comstock, all the years telescoped together. I imagine the two of them in that first dance. I am already arriving even then. I'm going to read one Snow White poem. And this is a book of persona poems, and some of them really stick to the Snow White fairy tale or some version of it, and some of them are totally modernized, and it was really fun being somebody else for a whole book. This is Snow White at happy hour. I'd like to tell you it's not easy being a sex symbol, diving into the honey jar, the must-have wine, poured by a half-man, half-rabbit. I pretended I didn't like it here right where I am, in the fir trees filled with dirty tricks and clean laundry, smaller than earth. That was the day I found the hunter clutching a pig heart, saying it was mine. Even my organs impersonated. I was wearing my fuck me red pumps, which are hell when you want to walk through a forest at midnight. Let those boys try me now, see how far they get. These days, the apple, full of pesticides. Dinner, but I digress. I wanted to ask you who held my hand. I'm assuming that we are safe, but what if we have to settle for the taste of mere mortals? I'm going to read a newer poem now, and I'm going to tell you about it after I read it. But what you need to know is that it really is written not to a person, but to embers that started a fire. Letter to the smoldering embers that started the Palisades fire. I know what it's like to sit and wait and watch, and even to feel the pressure of the heat, the scalding that needs to go somewhere. And I could have written to the fireworks, how people needed that bright-colored eruption that lit the sky over the city, the ones marking it with that gunpowder bouquet, bright with color and promise for the new year. Or I could have written to the downed power lines some people think were at fault, or the lack of water pressure in the hydrants. I could have written to the winds that finally whipped you into the hot glow I sometimes feel in my belly, into the towering flames, the sizzle, the huge appetite to burn above all else that ate home after home, the whole village with my friend's favorite restaurant and the bank where her mother's ruby necklace nested in its once safe deposit home. But I know wind can't be trusted. I've tried to talk to it many times, and it doesn't listen. It blew a tree onto my house, but that was another January in another city. I am trying to tell you about the cost of letting go. I'm trying to tell you that loss can actually kill you. My friend survived the fire, but not the aftermath. I want to know if you ever even considered stillness, silence, cooling, like the churning Pacific at the bottom of the bluffs by her house. And believe me, I know it's hard, maybe even impossible, to imagine not giving in to rage. I've been having that trouble lately myself. A fire needs spark and kindling and the force of that rude and unpredictable wind. So much had to go wrong and did. The last text I got from my friend said, "Some bad things have happened." I am just wondering if you even considered holding back instead of bursting. Sometimes I want to scream, but I don't. Sometimes all I feel inside my body is red. Thank you. I had a dear poetry friend that I knew for over 30 years who was really one of my poetry sisters before I ever got to Portland, and she had to leave her home that she loved in the Palisades. She had to be evacuated, was really struggling to find another place to live, and I honestly think she died of a broken heart, but technically she died of a heart attack, but it was very shocking. It was just a little over a year ago. So, and now for something completely different. This poem, if anybody is watching, not from here, but on video from Santa Cruz, I need to remind people that a lot of stuff in poetry is fiction. So let me just say that. I am not going to my 50th college reunion. But it's not mine, I reply to my Facebook friend who posted a list of people he hoped to see there. My fingers stumbling, exasperated. Didn't he know I was 2 years younger than almost all my friends in that college in the woods, where trees canopied our classes in Plato and Shakespeare, where every year students staged Midsummer Night's Dream outside in May on the one hill that could be counted on for sun? 2 years seemed like forever then, as it did when my kids were little, and one could only burble, while the other told whole stories. I felt like the burbler in those days, where my first day outside the dorm, I was stung by a bee in my armpit and had to walk around with my arms straight out for a week. Where I once tried to have a dinner party and cooked the mac and cheese with a plastic top on the casserole dish and smelled up the dorm when the plastic melted. Where a professor once said I was doing my Hubbard squash imitation when I was staring out into space. I stared a lot, but had never heard of Hubbard squash. Where I once rode on the back of a boy's motorcycle through the wooded campus in the fog. Was he older too? Everyone seemed impossibly old and cool, and why were they even being nice to me? My Facebook friend who posts multiple times a day, who I think I slept with once, but it was very rainy that night and I wasn't used to alcohol, so I'm not sure if we just slept or more than that, and I certainly don't want to ask him now. He posted pictures of himself with 2 other friends from the reunion, and I sent the photo to my friend David, one of the only people I actually talked to, and who is not on Facebook and who also did not go to the reunion, and he texted back, "Oh my God, who are these old men?" In one of the posts leading up to the event, my Facebook friend had a list of people he knew he would not see. It began RIP: I once wrote a snarky email about someone, an unforgivably unkind account of an encounter with her. A hurtful email I'm sure I wrote just to feel better about my burbling self. You already know what I did, but I'll tell you anyway. I sent the email to her instead of the intended person, who would have been equally gossipy and mean. You already know I couldn't unsend. That person, it turns out, whose name glares from the RIP list, died of cancer 10 years ago. I should have found some way to apologize, But I realized my mistake. There was so much it took too long for me to learn. My Facebook friend sends a photograph of the Cowell Fountain, where we'd sometimes sit on hot days. It still has those amazing bronze limbs that resemble branches or roots reaching up, or maybe even hands that never meet, in the spray that showers anybody nearby. Thank you. What did happen at Santa Cruz, even though a lot of that didn't happen, is that I met my husband there. And he's right over there, and this poem is for him. I'm also a couples counselor, and a lot of times I see young people who I feel like if they just had some history behind them, they would take some things a lot less seriously. This is called Enough History for Steve. Sometimes our life together is sprawling behind us like a twisty ribbon of road through the hills. Sometimes we're both in the car together. Sometimes I see one of us on the side of the road signaling for a pickup while the other drives on. It's a small red convertible, though we've never owned one. Vintage like we are. It's got a name that's sexier than we've ever been, Spitfire or Bugatti. Sometimes even in the tiny car together, there are ghosts between us, staring like the creepy dolls in movies that can't be killed, the eyes always open, even when ours flutter in the dark. Or we forget to look at each other and only look at the road ahead, which always disappears behind a sun-browned hill before I can see where it goes. I'd say this was a sweet recipe for growing old together, one without the usual amount of sugar. But it's always been this way with us. Meetings, partings, a softness in your voice at last, and your eyes finally here, waiting for me this time, after a long spell of distance. The unseen surprises us every time, the road unfurling as we drive. I used to chase the car when I saw you speed past, without even noticing me, shouting your name. Now there is enough history to know it won't be long before you remember. And anyway, there's always a nice view on the road while I wait. Thank you. This poem is on page 42. This poem is in the voice of my mother, in a way that, by the way, my mother would never have spoken, but a girl can imagine. My dead mother speaks to me, reminding me she is not a metaphor. Death is Rachmaninoff's third concerto played by Horowitz, inflamed and so loud sparks fly from the white keys. Death is also a black scorpion in the desert, tail curled in anticipation. The ocean is dismal with fog. It comes in blankets that hover but do not warm. Fog is also death. Even a tiny blonde girl who jumps rope, her ponytail leaping as she chants in a voice that rattles like seeds inside a gourd. And the trampoline with broken springs buried in the ground where rats play, where cats find them. I've been with death all this time, and still I'm dizzy watching her hunt. Death is sleek as any jaguar. Her velvet coat shimmers even at night. But me, I am just a mom who remembers when your hair was gold and your eyes glimmered while I read to you. You always did exaggerate. I am not death. I am just dead, and there is a difference. This cover is from a little tiny portion, not that tiny, but a portion of a painting that my father painted that's hanging in my living room. This poem is about a different painting, but just so you have a reference to some of my dad's art. It's on page 17. My father's painting. Once, long ago, my father painted the yellow hills in his green velour sweatshirt, spattered with color. The Santa Monica Mountains, that distant chaparral, with its yellow-eyed glass and monkey flower, Indian paintbrush and fire poppy. On the canvas, the red and gold looked like fire. A robin darts in and out of the shadows. The open wound of the weeping cherry is filled with dirt. Where the enormous oak once stood, a patch of lonely grass. On crisp, cold days, I am less aware of what I miss. My father's voice was my father's voice was bass drum deep, and his hair still dark but thin, strands of grass on the bald hill of his pate, shining through like something secret on a mountain in the distance. At night, when he couldn't sleep, he'd walk out in slippers to his studio, the linoleum speckled black and white, camouflaged the bright drops of paint when they fell, the room rich with that odor. My father died only 2 years older than I am now, my husband's age. A teenager, I wrote poems riddled with rhymes and angst in that green velour shirt. The hill painting hangs in my family room wall. On my family room wall, I see the sharp contours of the mountains blazing with hot gold and rust, and above, sunset red, angry. I hadn't noticed the cliffs' chiseled edges, how dark and monstrous they were, how dangerous the sky. This is another newish poem. This was written after a poem from my friend who died. Her name is Kathy Coleman, and she was a wonderful poet, and she wrote a poem called, I want to get it right, I've Always Loved Irregular Verbs. And I wrote a poem called I Stare at the Irrelevant Clock, and the title bleeds into the first line. I stare at the irrelevant clock, which is worse than stopped because the battery is groggy after a terrible night's sleep, and the minute hand can't make it all the way around at the right speed, almost the way you feel as a child when you can't reach your arms all the way around your mom, because adults are too big and you're too small, and the clock isn't stopping, but the time is all wrong, and that's how I feel right now. The time is just wrong in so many ways, and not just the time, but I've been going through stuff. No, not like that sounds. What I'm trying to say is the actual stuff. Things, sorting and boxing, as if I'm moving to a new planet, floating outside myself the way I did in dreams when I was sick as a child, and I would visit the whole house, witness the irrelevant conversations of grown-ups, listen for a mention of my name, but hear instead the shattered glass of arguments. So I've been going through all the detritus of so much too muchness and throwing out old poems, but not the really old ones, because the past feels more relevant than the present sometimes. And I seriously wondered, I'm not kidding, if I should save the single gloves and single earrings to bring to Goodwill, because there could be another lost glove or someone with an extra ear hole who might want them, especially the huge gold hoop that was too heavy for my ear anyway and would have fit around my wrist. And I thought I'd find its mate behind the dresser, but all I found was dust and stained hardwood. It's my grandmother's dresser, and the glossy finish is not so glossy in some parts. I kept her small calendar from 1968 that documented only the meals she served. I remember how she had shelves of those calendars from every year with things like tomatoes in aspic and duck à l'orange, dishes she did not make herself but assigned to cooks. I did throw out the old day planners I used to keep track of my life, but never my food. This just proves that I kept some irrelevant things while sorting, and what a strange keepsake, but I couldn't let it go. The things I wish I could keep that seem painfully relevant are undocumentable, like the last phone call with Kathy, which I could have taped, but who thinks about things being last or first, or the last time I hugged my mother, because as an adult, I could get my arms around her, and these things are not irrelevant, but they can't be found in a box or taken to Goodwill or recycled. I left the garage door open tonight, and the sky is purple in June's late dusk when I put a box on the pile. I want to talk to Kathy again. On the garage's far wall, another irrelevant clock gleams. This one stopped a long time ago, but it's way too high for me to reach. Thanks. Thank you. I, at one point, wrote a series of in defense of strange things poems, but I only got 2 of them in this book. And this one is called In Defense of Hallucination, and it's on page 63. Yesterday, I saw Jimi Hendrix everywhere. The top left corner of my bedroom window, a ghost image behind me in a mirror, a poster on the wall at the dentist's office, which usually just has a poster of a tooth. A friend of my sister's once told me she'd lost her virginity to Jimi Hendrix. Is he a mirage in her bathroom mirror too? If we imagine that we see the dead, that we wander past them in dark hallways and chase them in bright beads of water, why not my sister in the shiny wreckage of a broken martini glass? My father in a fresh dusting of talcum powder? Why not my mother under the Japanese magnolia on the corner that bursts with blooms 1 minute and pink litters the lawn the next? Why can I see Jimi Hendrix and not my mother? Like some Where's Waldo, I search for myself in the Venetian tapestry of my life. There is an urgent message I am supposed to receive. I can feel it in the interstices of my bones. I carry opera glasses and binoculars at all times. I may even get a telescope. I don't want to miss it when it finally arrives. The last poem I'm going to read is after a poem by Brendan Constantine, and his poem is called Where Do You Get Your Ideas? And my poem, which is on page 32, is Where Do Poems Come From? Sometimes in dreams, or dangling from the tips of pine needles like dew or tears. A sickle moon perched in my chest when I am alone and empty-headed. I found my first under a still warm sheet, read another on his thigh at the point of imprint with mine. I found one on the beach under that 5-tunnel rock there in the sand with all the sculpin and hermit crabs, but the hole bloomed with water before I could read it. I still have the rock. In my vegetable garden once, I collected October ghosts, smashed remains of sungolds, sharp spine of artichoke flowers, one still green brandywine, and there, with the delicate tomatillo skeletons, was a poem. unwritten, of course, but like the green tomato, I was sure it would ripen. Sometimes a poem lies in wait, coiled and hissing. If it strikes, I can suck the venom from my thumb and hold a pen. I'm certain there is a poem that will answer all my questions like a devoted mother who, attentive to signs of distress, carries her glassy-eyed child. This poem carries the exact names of everything. It knows my name, not the one I was given, but the one I was meant to have. Thank you. Switch classes again.
Yes, what a terrific reading. Let's give her another hand. So how we're proceeding is with the question and answer period. And Kristen from the committee is here, and she has a microphone. And so when you ask your question, could you wait for Kristen to get there? Because we get the answers from the poet, but we'd like to get the questions, if that's possible.
If the poet knows the answer.
Well, yeah, that's always a solution. And we plan to end with a poem by a poet. So we'll have the Q&A, and then we'll have a poem to end the evening in approximately 20 minutes or, well, we'll see. Anyway, it looks like there was a question here.
I have 2 questions.
Hang on.
I'll ask the nice one first. How did you choose the poems that you read tonight is the nice question. And the one that I used to ask people, and I think it was getting me in too much trouble because Mark Doty was the only person who ever answered, honestly, is which poet do you absolutely hate their poetry?
Oh. I hate a lot of the poems I see on Poem a Day.
Most people say a dead poet. That's how they get around that. They're like, well, I never really liked Wordsworth, or, all right, whatever. So how did you choose the poems for tonight?
For tonight?
Yeah.
I had a list of poems. I knew I wanted to read the 3 new ones, and I had a list of other poems. And then I did a Zoom with Andrea, and we picked poems.
Cool.
I mean, I had some that I wanted to read. I had some that I read in Patterson and hadn't read in a while. So.
Well, I'd like to ask you, kind of along that line, you mentioned about getting poems in this book. And how did you do that process? How did you get poems, particular poems?
You mean, how did I decide what went in the book?
Yes. What poems got into the book?
I will.
Yeah.
Piles and piles and piles, which actually is the same way I did Snow White, except on Snow White, I did a section of my sister's old house because I was visiting there and I had all the poems, and there was this nice little foyer where I could just put them on the ground, and that was long enough ago that I could easily get on the ground and up from the ground. This time I had piles and piles of poems, and I had poems. The hardest thing was, since I didn't have a persona book where everything was in the voice of Snow White or in the voice of somebody in the Snow White fairy tale, it was hard to figure what belongs in this book, like what goes somehow with other things in the book. And again, it was, piles and piles, and Andrea and Pauline, and because very helpful to have other eyes on your poems when you're trying to figure out which pile to put something in, which is also how poems get ordered in a book, and that's really hard to order poems in a book. So I kind of stuck them in different piles and tried them in different piles. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It's a piling system. I don't know, other people who've done books, is that similar to how you do them? Yeah, Christine is nodding.
I speak for everybody, apparently.
Yeah.
You said you were a counselor, so dealing with a lot of people's stories are coming your way. I notice there's a lot of lightness and levity to your poems. Is that, I want to say, is that an accident, or is that something how you channel bringing some lightness into your own life?
Well, it's interesting because when I was a kid, one of my sisters read my journal and said, "Why are you so depressed? Why is everything so dark?" And I felt like saying, "Why did you read my journal?" But
Yeah.
I think a lot of my poems are really dark, actually. But
Yeah.
when I kind of pick ones that have a little bit of lightness when I read, so that people will stay for the whole reading.
Yeah.
But if you told me to write a funny poem, I couldn't do it. Like, that is not something I ever would sit down and try to do, because I know I couldn't do it. But sometimes I can waltz into something that's got levity to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what it, I feel like levity in dark times is important, but it's also important to recognize dark times.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I actually have another question. So do you, when you're picturing writing a poem or you're about to write a poem, is it because you are particularly inspired by a striking image, or do the words come to you first?
Often it's because I'm in a poetry group. 3 Cheers for Poetry groups. I'm in a wonderful prompt group, and we are always looking at some other poems by other poets. I used to, many years ago, when I wrote with my friend Kathy, we would have lists of words and lines from poems from other people. And I use those images or words or lines or something from a poem I read as a jumping off point. And often I cut it out of the final poem, but it starts me out.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Do you have specific poems or poets that you turn to during these darker times to give you solace and comfort?
Oh, that's a good question. I tend to find solace from people who can address. I like it that people can address the dark times, even if they're not these times. So I recently have gotten Patricia Smith's New and Selected, and even though a lot of those poems are dark, I find it comforting to read good poetry, and poetry that addresses kind of the drama. I think I'm most interested in the drama between the inner and outer world, and I'm interested in poetry that does that. And so I find it comforting to read about what other people have noticed about the world, and also what their inner world is expressing about that, if that makes sense.
I'm going to kind of flip Christine's question. I remember when I was took my first real serious poetry class. Well, it was 101. It wasn't that serious, but I was an adult. And we read Proof Rock, which I thought was beautiful, and it did something, but it didn't make me want to be a poet. In the same book, some of you might remember Sound and Sense, that old book that probably most of us, some of us definitely had that book. Adrienne Rich's Living in Sin was the poem that was like, okay, that is something I want to do. Can you think of a moment like that where you knew?
Adrienne Rich. But diving into the wreck, I saw her when I was at Santa Cruz. And
is that true?
That is true. And not her, I mean, I went to see her. Yeah. And another true story about that time is that I had a job working for Tilly Olson. I don't know how many people have read Tilly Olson. She had a concussion and needed somebody to drive her to the grocery store and stuff like that. And she lived in a tiny little bungalow that was completely lined in books. And I would go there and she would show me like the latest book that she got. And she showed me a book by Adrienne, her dear friend, that was published. And she showed me that every single page had black writing on it. Adrienne was still editing those poems. She was still revising those poems. And I feel like what I learned from that was to accept that it's okay if a poem is never finished. And I feel like Adrienne taught me a really important lesson, even though I had no relationship with her. I did not do Tilly's ironing, but a little fun fact, she wrote me checks. And my whole name, which is not a short name, she wrote in such tiny script that, the line of the check, my name was like this much of it. It took up no space at all. She had tiny writing.
So what's next
What's next?
for you? What are you working on?
I'm just writing, I write poems when I can. I'm still working. So a lot of times it's at Word Sisters, my wonderful prompt group. And I want to start making piles and see what I've got for another book, but I haven't started doing that yet. But I think that's the next thing for me is more piles. And there are things that didn't get into this book that might belong in a new book.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I heard you say about this book. There were things that didn't get into it.
Yeah, there were things that didn't get into it. There are only so many dead mother poems you can have in one book. Well, she has a whole book of dead father poems. Yeah, that's true.
You can have a whole book of a certain type of poem.
Are there any more questions?
Oh, there's somebody.
Okay, so is there a correlation between what you do for a living and what you really like to do, the poems?
Yeah. Because I already said it. I'm really interested in the relationship between the inner and outer world. And I love hearing people's stories and helping them connect with their inner world. And I do that in my work, and I feel like I try to do that in my poetry. And I do sometimes, if somebody's interested, I used to do it more because people kind of knew me as that when I was in LA, but I do sometimes help people connect with themselves by writing in a session if they're interested in doing that. It might just be saying, oh, that's an amazing line, you need to write that down and keep writing. It might just be that. I like working with poets.
All right. So if there are no more questions, Donna is going to end with the poem.
I am. And this poem is on page 90. It's the second to last poem in the book. And it's after a wonderful poem by Nazim Hikmet. Am I saying that right, Paul Ann? Okay. And his poem is called Things I Didn't Know I Loved. And my poem is called Things I Never Knew I Loved. And it was written during COVID, so some of the things about hugs you'll recognize from that time. Things I never knew I loved. I'll switch glasses again. I never knew I loved October, its light glint on leaves, the leaves themselves blushing and unsure. I never knew I loved the bite of morning air and the scrambling of secrets that live in mulch and loam in October, and how much I loved sleep until I couldn't sleep. The startled wake up of pain, the ache trying to rest against the cush of the pillow. The dream that I loved too, gone now like a stallion galloping past on young sturdy legs, when mine are neither. And in the morning, the groggy eyes luscious with sleep, and I love it so much I can't leave it. Even in October, when I never knew I loved garlic, to eat it, yes, but to hold the bulbous purple heads, to ready the soil for seed, to feel the dry edges of the skin on my dry fingers, the hopefulness of garlic, when the tomatoes are green and unripening and finished with their seasons, because I knew I loved tomatoes, and now they're over, like all those berries which I knew I loved, and the jam I made, and those glorious peaches. But something has to bring hope when the fruit has died away, when the weeds have taken over, the promise of something still growing. I don't always love hugs, but now that they are forbidden, I wish I could feel my friend's apricot scarf touching my face when I hug her goodbye. If only I could, because now everything is off limits, except trees. And how can I hug the trees? Those very fine bits that prick into your skin, almost invisible. And even though I love manicures, I didn't know I loved dirt under my fingernails. When I work the weeds out of the garlic bed, when the promise of something growing seems all I can hope for. I have always loved walking, the click of my sandals on the street and the way wetness splashes up from the lawn, an almost imperceptible spray from grass to ankles. But now that everything hurts, I think of my mother, her tired knees and hips making it difficult to move, but also how she loved the smell of bacon cooking, almost as much as the taste. I never knew I loved my mother's voice until I couldn't hear it anymore. Heard instead my own groans and clicks when I moved my swollen knees. Now, in October, 20 years after her death, when I didn't know I'd love missing her. Imagining her here, as I imagine the stephanotis blossoms, the lilacs, all the exploding scents of spring, how what's gone lingers like someone's perfume. In October, when the sky is dimming and it's too soon to plant the garlic, and the leaves are still holding desperately onto the branches. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, for being here. Donna's got some books over
I
here.
have books.
Take a look at those. There's some refreshments, as I mentioned earlier.
Books, cookies, what more do you need?
Oranges.
Oranges?
Okay, so what a rich evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Oh, I have to.